Actually, we're just going to go live. Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to the Really Charlie podcast. My name is Charlie Perry, and my most impressive guest here, Laurel Berryman. I love this young lady, this leader, and I'm glad she's here. But let's just say good afternoon to everyone. How you doing, Laurel?
Hi, Charlie. Thanks again for having me. It's a big honor. I know we talked about getting this done for a while, so I'm glad to finally be here. I'm doing well, just holiday stuff and spending money I don't have on people I love, but hey, it's worth it. You know, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Family, work, podcasting, the radio station. And just doing things that I didn't do in my very proud career as a law enforcement officer, police officer in the city of New Bedford. So now I get to do the things that I want to without being filtered and worrying about answering to someone because I said something or did something. At least now I could kind of be myself. Well, I always was myself, but I had to pay attention to how I spoke because I was representing so many different titles.
Right, right.
So, but we're going to give a little bio of my guest, my
Okay.
outstanding guest. And let's see, got to put my glasses on so I can read this fine print here. All right, viewers, listeners, this is my guest, my leader, as I call her. She is a leader. A trained facilitator, speaker, and thought leader, Laurel A. Berryman is setting a new standard for institutions throughout the northeastern part of U.S. in abolishing systematic racism, ableism, and gender discrimination. Her commitment to using education as a tool for reform, empowerment, and identity drives her professional and personal life. In 2020, Laurel graduated magna cum laude from the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth with a BA in women's and gender studies, including a focus in pre-law. Laurel specializes in workplace development, program coordination, and facilitation, information technology, and sustaining the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In her current role as Human Resource Assistant in the Institutional Equity and Human Resources at Community College of Rhode Island, also known as CCRI, Laurel brings her DEI background into recruitment and talent acquisition to establish and maintain an equitable and diverse workplace and working environment. She has been featured in several media outlets, including MTV, Medium, and Apple Podcasts. Most recently, she has been featured as a panelist on the renowned YouTube channel, The Grapevine. Awesome. Awesome. And that's only a little part. I know better than that. There's definitely more to you than this little short bio. So, but it's the meat and potatoes, and that's what I like about
Right,
having you on here.
right. There's only
All
so many characters LinkedIn allows, so
right.
that's the basic,
Exactly.
the meat and potatoes.
That's right. That's right. Um, the subject in hand today for you and I is critical race theory. It's definitely all over the country. It's and I was on YouTube listen to quite a few things. Like one of my daily things I do is listen to the Daily Show, and they were talking about critical race theory and how it just you know it's as old as the Afro. And then when you kind of think about it, it is as old as the Afro. So when you're looking at pictures that you see and you're saying, wow, his subject matter has been in place for a while. And now here it is, 2021. Now people want to jump on it and talk about it. So it took you that much time. It took you a lifetime, people's lifetimes to actually talk about this. It's crazy. And there was a point in the 1990s where they did try to bring it in forward, and it just didn't take on the steam, and then all of a sudden now it's up again. So, um, critical race theory. Do you
Well,
have a definition? Go
what's
ahead.
interesting is that even before the Afro era, right before the 70s, when legal scholars were talking about critical race theory and bringing it to the table, it critical race theory has been a thing that has been discussed, mostly amongst Black scholars and academics and everyday people since since America's inception, right? When our
Yes.
ancestors were stolen and brought here. Similarly to, I know you and I both love Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality, right? She gave it
Hmm.
a name, but that
Yes.
concept of your different identities shaping your experience has been being discussed since, Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth in the 1800s.
Hmm.
It just didn't have a name. And then again, I think and this is going a little bit off topic, but it's just one of the really kind of sinister things I think about the new generations of people, which one of I'm a part of, obviously, but people just act like it's new. Like you
Hmm.
discovered critical race theory because you saw the TED Talk first and you posted
Hmm.
about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like, no, it's been here, like you said, since it's been here forever.
Yes.
And the thing about it as well that you mentioned, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, is that even now, it maybe didn't take in the 90s, right? People didn't want to discuss it. A lot of that is, even though now we live in a post-racial society because we had one Black president, even back then it was just like, if there's not a racist person in the bunch or a racist thing being taught in this class, for example, then racism, you don't need to worry about it. We don't need to discuss it. And so even now, it's not taking now. It's just that people are so angry about it that they keep discussing it. And what's funny is that Republicans, namely, and I'll just say at the outset that it's not just Republicans, there's Democrats, there's all kind of different people within the political sphere who don't know what critical race theory is, who oppose it, or who don't do anything to stop what's happening with it. Um, it's not, you know what I mean?
Hmm. It's
They're all doing it, and so it's just not being protected in that way, and then it gets misconstrued, and the way that people discuss it is not what it's supposed to be. It's not what it is, and it's
yeah,
very simple. It's a very simple theory.
and trying to cover it, and I'm like, well, why are you trying to cover up something you don't understand? If you don't understand it, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So, you know, ignorance um, could be touched upon, and then actually just bring it to discussion. And that's all it was a discussion. It was basically educated people discussing it from, and where we got this acronym of CRT, and it's one thing I like about discussion, and there's one thing I dislike is trying to shut up people. And it's like, wait a minute, let them speak. Let's hear it. Let's hear it out. So, but
But isn't
um,
that America's MO though,
yeah.
right? Like, hasn't it always been like that? Like, if we don't understand you, then you just can't fit in here, right? Like
Hmm.
I was talking about this with someone the other day because of Thanksgiving, and why it shouldn't be celebrated and decolonizing it and all of those things, in terms of not understanding, right? Like what happened not only to our community, but indigenous communities, after their land, not only was their land stolen from them, not only were they, massacred, but those that survived were put in schools where they were taught that all of their spirituality is completely, it's just wrong. It doesn't make sense. You having long hair, no, we're going to cut that. And you're going to look
Hmm.
like this. And you're going to change your name from your indigenous tribe, right? That means something, that gives you a feeling of identity, which I want to talk about identity as it relates to critical race theory a little later. But taking away that identity and giving you a white name, a European name,
Hmm.
right? And taking that away from you. And so hasn't that always been, right, like what America does? It's just, if it doesn't fit their narrative of the land of the free and the home of the brave, when it
Hmm.
reveals the truth behind this country's inception, no, we're not going to talk about it. If you talk about it, you're getting blocked, you're getting, ostracized, unfriended, whatever.
Yeah.
That's nothing new.
Yeah. It isn't. It's the same old makeup, and uh, sometimes people need a makeover. America needs a. Slightly. Well, I can't say slightly. It needs a makeover.
It
It
needs a
definitely
makeover.
does. And so I mean, I'm happy I'm here. I don't want to go anywhere else. Do I want to see other things? Yeah, I do. I do want to see other things. I want to see other cultures. I got a culture shock moving from Massachusetts to California, and
Mm.
that's within the same country. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
learned and got to meet people, very great, people I'm still friends with.
Mm. Mhm.
So hey, we got a friend on the comment section, Gardner Greeny.
The
How you doing?
greenie.
Yeah, good afternoon. So, but let's go. Let's start with our first question, me to you, and it says, "Is critical race theory more political now?"
Yes. Again, to start that question off, anything that brings about the truth of something in America becomes political. A lot of the things you're talking about, the Daily Show, and the Daily Show does an excellent job of they, obviously mix it in with comedy, but showing um, the backlash of just people. I saw a clip the other day, and it was all of these different people, mostly on Fox News, but just giving these outrageous definitions of critical race theory. Like they don't know what it is; they're just threatened by it.
True.
And so it's become political in that sense. Um, it's interesting when we talk about whiteness, right? Whiteness and privilege, that there are literally laws being passed right now and people advocating for laws to be passed for their children to learn less, for
Hmm.
their books to be smaller. Like, imagine the amount of privilege you have to actually like want that to happen, and it's happening. It's in the works. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. So this just the span of just the privilege mixed in with critical, all of these things, it's really intense. And a lot of it, we're not going to be able to get to it on this podcast. I studied it for 4 years and I'm
Hmm.
still learning more about it. So it's very complicated. And I just want the audience to understand that if you walk away from this and you still don't understand all of the nuances and all of the different things, it's okay. But just understand, again, critical race theory is very basic. So I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier from the 70s and the Afro era and stuff like that. So basically, legal scholars in the 70s were seeking to answer the question, why, after having 2 decades of civil rights laws being passed and protections for people of color, why are there still so many human rights violations happening? Why is there still such a racial issue in America? And those professors taught people like our hero Kimberly Crenshaw, who went and taught
Hmm.
other people who I studied Kimberly Crenshaw, who now we are asking the question. We're going deeper than just saying the law. The law itself, the institution of the law, right, clearly has an issue with race. But
Yes.
then now in this generation and this kind of school of upcoming civil rights attorneys, we're asking ourselves, what is it about the American fabric itself? Because it's not just law, it also translates to the education system, prisons, hospitals, all of
Hmm.
these different American institutions, right? There's inequities in all of them and racial barriers and things in all of these things. And so you have to ask yourself, it goes beyond just that institution. It's not just the hospitals, it's not just the law. It's America. Who created America? Who created these laws? Who are these laws created to benefit? Who are these laws created to oppress? And you have to
Hmm.
ask yourself those things, because these laws that were created when the founding fathers were doing what they were doing, all kind of black magic, those laws still exist. They're still here now, right? And so how do
Hmm.
those laws that were created all the way back then when black people were slaves, and indigenous people were being pushed off their land and murdered, how does that play into now? How does that play when you have a group of people who are white, heterosexual, cisgendered, landowning men being the ones to say, this is how America runs, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, this is what we believe, this is who we're going to love, this is who we're not going to love, this is in a country full of women, queer folks, all kind of different black people, immigrants, all kind of different people, and you had one group of people creating the laws?
Yeah.
right? No.
And it's why it's so important uh, to vote, to get out there and vote, and not just register, cast your vote. So many people think that, all right, I did my job, I
Right,
registered the vote, but you
right,
need to vote. And whether it's for one side or the other, I just think that it's very, very important that we all vote. And when I did campaign and try to run for the mayor of the city of New Bedford, and later on after the loss, I just, um, I look at it and I say, wow, look at all these people that didn't vote, and names and people that I know personally
mm,
would have made the outcome much different, much, much different, and
right.
so, but anyways, um, so this, with you coming on board and we setting up this podcast, it allows me to be it allows me to dig a little bit deeper on the subject and just try to get educated myself.
Right.
um and we all get caught up in different personal likes and dislikes, and this is something that I do like and I'm going to pay attention to much often, just because and I'm not going to go out there and try to fight every battle. I'm going to fight it when I can. I'm going to bring on podcasts that are just like this, and have people talk about it. Um, and and that's what I'm going to try to do. You know, I only have so much stamina. You kind of get burned out as these national and local elections have been going on, and you find a fight, and then finally you gotta inhale, catch your breath, and
Right.
then exhale, and then begin again. So, but this comment here says, Charlie, look at all the inventions made by African American, excuse me, that never was told to us as kids in school, which is so true. You kind of think of all the things that were invented by an African American, and it's one of the most useful, or one of the most favorite things that you have. From, I mean, they'll tell you about peanut butter and who invented it, or who, and those are little things. But
Right.
what about the big things? What about the you know, the placement of a satellite up in orbit, put in orbit, that's all a black um, scientist. Those are all different things, and we have someone from my own town, New Bedford, who had a huge part in that, being being an airman in the Air Force, huge
Right.
part of it. But
And
people don't.
even right, and even speaking of New Bedford and my family history a little bit, like the whaling industry, how often in our textbooks and in New Bedford and just the histories that we hear, do you hear about the Cape Verdean advancements in the whaling industry? Like you don't, it's Portuguese or it's immigrants, but like there were like the runaway enslaved people and Cape Verdean people who immigrated here, some of which were shanghaied and brought here. They built this industry, they built the whaling industry, they lit the world, but
Mhm.
it's still spoken about from a white perspective. Everything is watered down, and the histories and the truths behind it is all watered down. Another thing, I wanted to share a funny story with you, for the person posting the comment. I actually used to, one of the shows I used to love, love, love to watch after school was The Parkers with Monique, and it
Mhm.
would come on BET like every day at like 5 o'clock, whatever. And there was this episode that they had for their Black History Month special or whatever. And one of the projects that they did, one of them, and it's funny because the white character on the show did this project, but she created this entire long, long list and presented it. And she found that you cannot live, and it's a fact because I looked it up. Americans cannot live, like virtually everything that we do that's a part of our day-to-day lives, something was touched by an African American person. Fitted bed sheets,
Mhm.
peanut butter, like you said, stoplights, Jack Daniels, like all of these things were created by Black people, and we don't know. I didn't learn it in school, and I went to private schools and Catholic and Christian schools, right? Where the education was a little more, it could be kind of, things were taught differently, but I still never learned those things. I learned about it on the Parkers after school and all the other Black
Yeah.
sitcoms, right? What's that about? Why am I
Hmm.
going to school if I'm not learning history?
So true. And I mean, I throughout, let me see, I want to say late 90s, I was thinking about kind of being a teacher, and on the side and doing whatever I had to. And the thing that I wanted to be is a history teacher, only because it kept me interested. Why should I do anything else if I'm not interested in it? If I decide to do something, let me do history, because you know what? I'm always going to be entrenched in it. I'm always going to be interested in it. So if I bring it to the students in the classroom, guess what? I'm just going to be a better teacher, and
Mm.
I love it. So the but history is very, very important, and it's a huge. I don't think I think I know all of my history teachers, and one was Mr. Dow, and this guy was amazing. He just bring he caught my attention instantly, being in front of that class, and nothing he didn't shy away from anything, and I love that about him. So, you know, and he was a white man talking about Black history, and he didn't need someone to tell him, all right, let's do it in February. This guy was doing it every single week. He was doing something. Something came up, or the reason why I mention it is because everything that we were talking about, he always bring someone else into the classroom, an African American into the subject matter, and he
Wow.
can always apply it to it, whether it was the Revolutionary War, whether it was slavery, whether it was the Korean War, anything that he bring up, he was always bringing you know an African American into light. So
And just
Michael
imagine
Sant,
that if
yeah,
you were in school now, that teacher would be fired for
hmm,
teaching those kind of things. He would be fired and he would be fighting, probably filing a lawsuit right now because that's
yeah,
what's going on, right? Imagine that
yeah. What's it?
and how that might have changed the trajectory of your life and what you believe and what you know. And this
Mhm.
is what kids today, as we speak, are dealing with.
So true.
Yeah.
Michael Michael Joe Santos says we were in the stove boats. The statue in front of the library is historically incorrect. Correct.
Mhm. Mhm.
The model for that statue um, was actually an African American, and then they changed it. And Russell Ramus, who works in the library, he tells a great story about that. I'll have to get him on, and that would be another podcast in itself. But he explains the whole story. In fact, if you're ever looking to someone to speak on that, Mike Russell Ramus is the guy to talk to. So
Good to
the
know.
all right, let's see. Great comments. I want to tell you, everyone out there, thank you for coming in and giving us your time, and your energy, especially these comments and praising my guest. Which is well deserved. She definitely needs to hear this, because sometimes you don't get to hear the great things when you're fighting a very, I don't want to say taboo subject, but a subject that people just don't want to talk about. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy with all these comments. Let's see, let's bring you know dear friend of mine, constant supporter here. And always hello, good afternoon. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Just want to bring these up before we bring up the next question. We are proud of people, and Charlie, how the Black Panthers fed us young kids when our families had no money. So true. That was my breakfast. And taking us you know to the various places. To eat, and the whole community came out. People don't realize that the breakfast was, the Black Panther Party breakfast was donations and contributions from organizations and community people, both white and black, that were part of this. And people don't. It wasn't just one sided. There was so many people that were helping out with this.
Mhm.
Victor Tavares from the famous Tavares family. Hey, home guy, I love you. like the first one. Listen, Victor, I'm nice to see that you're paying attention, and I love it. Especially someone like him. Um, to be here listening to you, Laurel, to listen to you and myself, it's very very special because those
Absolutely.
are the. All right, let's do two more, and let's see. She needs to be recognized, of course. She is being recognized. To tell you the truth, she is being recognized. We just want to do and share this podcast. As you share it to your Facebook profile, make sure it's public so people can comment on it and actually interact later on with Laurel and myself. You may have questions. You may need some resources to support what we're both saying or what
Right.
others are saying.
Right.
And let's see, the last one is I'm so proud of my people. Of course, we all are. We all are. We all Americans. Remember that. It's no problem being proud of what we have here. We just want to make it better and include it.
Right. Right.
All right. Let's see. All right. Let's go with the second question here. And by the way, you're doing a good job. Not that you need my approval.
Thank you.
um.
I try.
All right. Let's see. And when you do see your dad, give him a high five for me. Great dude. And now I know where you get it from. You're just
Oh,
excelling
thank
and making it
you.
much much better.
Yeah, that guy, my dad's like a walking history book. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the stories he has, I know we talked about it on that podcast that I did in, what was it, in 2017.
Hmm.
But yeah, like he talks about, my great grandfather was, I believe, 100% Blackfoot, right? And Blackfoot, the indigenous tribe, lived in
Hmm.
Tifton, Georgia, which was way out in the country. When you watch the like Mississippi burning kind of movies like that, and you're like, this is not a place I would ever want to be in the South. That's where they lived. And
Hmm.
he every summer they would take a road trip. He and his uncles and I think his mom would go, my grandmother, my nana, and they would road trip all the way down to Clifton, Georgia. And my dad has stories of, being from Boston now, Roxbury, right?
Hmm.
Growing up in the 50s and 60s, didn't see the separate water fountains and things like that, right? And he has this story about stopping at a rest stop, and he saw the white and colored water fountains, and he was like, "I'm not drinking from that one. Why? Like, first of all, why does it say colored, and why is it filthy, and the water's yellow?" And no, and he went to go drink out of the white one, and his uncle, thank God, who was with him, who grew up there, was like, "No, no, 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 no," and gripped him up quickly, and they left. And it's like, wow, you could have been in Emmett Till, right?
I was getting
Um,
ready to say that. I
breaking
was
those
getting ready.
unwritten laws, those Jim Crow laws. Um, Crazy. And so growing up with that, uh, I call us an Eyes on the Prize family. Every Martin Luther King's Day,
Hmm.
when Eyes on the Prize, that PBS special would come on, my brother and I,
Hmm.
when we were kids, we stayed up. We had to take naps during the day. We stayed up till 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday, whatever it was, before school the next day, to watch that. So my dad made sure that we knew our roots as African Americans, and the steps that we've taken in our family and just in our community in general, to fighting against oppression and racism. So it's I take it very seriously. It's a matter of life and death. It really is, and I wish people would talk about it more so in that context. And it's just not discussed like that, unfortunately. Not that I see it, not these days.
True. Victor Tavares asked, "Who is your dad?" That's up to you if you want to answer.
Oh yeah, no, he would appreciate the clout, I think. His name is my dad's name is Leroy Berryman Jr.
Awesome.
And he's a Roxbury native, so grew up in Boston his whole life. And then he and my mom met, and they moved to New Bedford, and we were raised in New Bedford in the North End. My whole life I've been in New Bedford, so yeah. He's a
Very,
drummer.
very
Used to play
nice.
with Aretha Franklin, James Brown, and he would play in his now, he's out of his like rock star phase, I think, in his
Mhm.
older age. He plays at church now, so he uses his gifts for the glory of God now. So, yeah, you
That's
can catch
awesome.
him at church.
Well, coming from the music, Coming from the music industry, Victor's probably come across him over the years, and definitely knows who he is. So,
Yeah.
uh, second question is, how does teaching critical race theory benefit and empower students of color?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked.
Thank you.
It's very loaded, right? There's a lot of different
Yeah.
ways. I think the main
Hmm.
one is identity and truth, right? First of all, I want to say, and again, in getting our listeners and things to understand critical race theory, um, critical race theory is something, again, and I say it like that because, like, when you watch even MSNBC, even if you're far, you're not agreeing with the far right at all, and you try not to listen to them, even when you're clicking past channels, like, you'll turn the TV off to not hear what they're saying, right? Even if you're not listening to them, even on MSNBC, sometimes the people that get on there are talking about it like and it's a graduate level theory. It is. I mean, people learn this in grad school, right? But they talk about it from that perspective. They don't break it down, right? And
Hmm.
so the best way that I can break it down is to express that people of color live critical race theory every single day. Every time you leave your house, you're living in critical race theory, right? So when you get in the car and you're wearing a hoodie or something, right? And a police pulls you up, you see a police officer driving past you or behind you, you start to theorize in your head what might happen if you forget it, whether you do anything wrong or not. What might happen because I'm Black and I'm wearing a dark hoodie and the hood's on and there's a police officer behind me, right? That's critical race theory, right? Um,
Hmm.
At this point, being in your house alone or playing loud music and knowing you're living in a neighborhood that's predominantly white, you have theories as to what might happen if you throw that party or if you invite all of your Black family members or did whatever racial background you're from, but you invite all these people who are non-white into this area and you're listening to cultural music and dancing, what might they do? So that fear that we live in, which is very valid, although it's not fair, and perhaps it's a piece of ancestral trauma, but that's how we survive. That's critical race theory. So we
Hmm.
live it every single day. And so for kids to learn that, like I said, it's a graduate level theory and there's a lot of nuances to it. It's very complicated. It gets into talking about, decolonial thought and what America would look like if it was decolonized and all those things, which are very, very complicated. Um, just to learn their history, to be able to make those connections that, oh yeah, when I went to the store the other day, I thought that maybe if that clerk was following me, it might be because of this. And for them to understand that's critical race theory. Perfect example. But the biggest piece, like I was saying before, is absolutely, absolutely is identity. I tell this story and I'm not shy about it, to be completely honest with you, because I believe not only is there power in testimony, but, it's important for people to know. A lot of people, especially in New Bedford, can relate. I identify as a multiracial Black woman, right? I'm African American. I am Portuguese, all kind of things. I'm not going to start naming them,
Yeah.
but that's how I identify. And I grew up with my mom's Cape Verdean side of her family. My dad's family all lives in Boston and Florida and things like that. And so I grew up being socialized around my mom's family in New Bedford. And as you know, and this is not something I'm going to get too deep into because this could be a whole nother episode, but for multiple reasons, namely always the foundation being anti-Blackness that's internalized, Cape Verdean people do not identify with their African heritage. We are Africans. There's no two
Hmm.
ways, right? Our ancestors were kidnapped from all different parts of Africa, which we have that identity problems. We don't know, right? Could have been Nigeria, could have been South Africa, could have been Kenya, but they were taken from parts of Africa, brought to this island, traded as slaves, right? And then everything happened after that, and here we are. But that's how I grew up. And so I identified in a lot of ways as white because,
Hmm.
my mom looks white. Her skin color, she's very, very light, even though she identifies as a Black woman. But that's what I was seeing. You know what I mean? On my mom's side of the family, they're very, favoring the Portuguese roots in terms of color and features. And so that's how I grew up and going to schools being, my brother and I being 2 of 5 people of color in the entire school, and I'm talking students and teachers.
Hmm.
Um, you grow up and you're dating, white boys, and all your friends are white girls, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you're losing that side of who you are. You don't understand who you are, or, appreciate the natural texture of your hair and things like that. And so it became to a point, because that was all I was being socialized around, I grew to hate my Blackness. And I wanted to do the things that I could do to run as far away from that as I could, because as a kid, only being raised in whiteness, not being taught Black history and things like that in school, I grew to learn, which is something that kids learn all of us learn every day, is that the closer you are to whiteness, the closer you are to being successful. Whiteness equals success. Right? It equals power, it equals money, and that's the American dream. That's what we all want, right? We all want to have the big house and the dog and the marriage and the this, whatever. And to do that, you have to be as close to whiteness as you can get. And so that's what I tried to do. I was depressed because I could never achieve that, right? I was always the Black girl, and people would weaponize that against me or whatever it was. And once I reached higher education and I took on women's and gender studies, I started to learn what anti-Black racism was, how it's internalized in all of us. Again, someone just mentioned in the comments that they can relate. It's not just me. Every Black child in America is socialized to hate themselves. When you go to toy stores, you don't see Black dolls. Now you do. But when we were all kids, you don't see Black toys. When you see beauty pageants and everything else, they're all white, or they're very light, racially ambiguous, Black men or women that could be Puerto Rican, or they could be this, anything that's, just getting further and further away from Blackness. And that's what we're raised to believe is what you need to just do. Right. And so when I started studying women's and gender studies at UMass Dartmouth, I started to learn, how that was affecting my life, and how those were things that were fed to me, but I could unlearn them. It wasn't something that was a definite, that this is how you were raised and this is how it is. It was like, no, absolutely not. Number one, you're not the only person that feels like this. Everyone in your community experiences this constantly. And number two, you can change it through education, and education absolutely saved me. It absolutely saved me. I would not be able to even understand the things that we're talking about right now if I did not educate myself and unlearn everything that had been fed to me from the time that I was a little girl growing up. And so that's why critical race theory it gave me a sense of identity and power. And once I could understand, like, this is who you are, when I rejected all those notions of anti-Blackness and I said, this is who I am, I'm proud of who I am, I'm proud of my white ancestors, I'm proud of my Black ancestors, I'm proud of my indigenous ancestors, they are all me. And this is what they went through for me to be here where I am. And this is how I'm moving in the world, right? And learning just, again, the history of our accomplishments in America, the negative things, all of those things, it really genuinely saved me. And I'm very, very, very grateful for it. Now, I will say, tying it back to what's going on now, even in I haven't gone through grad school yet, but even in undergrad, I meant to say, I wasn't being taught critical race theory necessarily. I was I'll say this, in women's and gender studies, right? You're still learning about white feminism. You're learning about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, the white women who started this movement for white women. And they were like, I guess Black men deserve rights too. Okay. But Black women, you're Black and you're a woman, so we don't really know what to do with that. So y'all just stand over there, right? And so and that's what I was learning in class. I was like, how come I'm not seeing Black women in this movement? And so I actually took it upon myself within my studies to make what I was learning. I did that legwork, not the professors getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. I did that legwork to learn about Black feminism and Black feminist thought and understand critical race theory and how it applies to my life. And once I could apply it to my life, I could apply it to everything else and understand it in its full form, right? And so that is why it's so important for students of color in particular to learn about critical race theory, because every day it is being fed to them that who they are because of their skin color or because of their gender identity or their sexuality, but always beginning with race, they are not good enough, they are less than, they need to be this or they die. You need to move like this or we'll put you in jail. You need to move like this or we'll shoot you in the back. You need to move like this or we will use rape as a weapon of, genocide against your community, which has been amongst Black women in America. So, they need to understand those truths in order for them to grow and be who they are and be happy in who they are. And then to, again, like me, you learn that about yourself, and then you want to educate other people on that. And then you want to learn more about that. And I think what is it's just so ugly, to put it plainly, is that the far right has made this like it's a war. Like,
Yeah.
we can't have these young kids of color learning who they are. We can't have it. We cannot have it. We can't have the truth being taught. We can't have people learning the true story of Thanksgiving, the true story about what happened when Columbus came to this area, to the Americas in 1492. We cannot have these people learning about who their ancestors were, what we've done to them. Because if they understand that, then they'll, they have that power then to, have that community and rise up and find ways to dismantle racism and dismantle all of these oppressive structural systems. A good example is, go ahead, Charlie.
That energy, if that energy was reverted, like you're saying, could
Right.
you imagine how long we would have been so further ahead? Hundreds of years ago, we would have been so far ahead.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, one of the best examples that I can give everyone, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it, but is Roots. The scene where they have, when Kunta Kinte they're whipping him because he ran away, right? And they're trying to force him to say, my name is Toby. My name is Toby. My name is Toby. And he keeps saying Kunta, Kunta, Kunta. He will not say this American name. That is not who he is. That is not what his parents named him. That is not his history. It's not his roots. So he continues to say Kunta to a point where he almost dies, and then he eventually says it, right? And that scene is very powerful because it goes to the very real life thought process that slavers had, where you can't just make a slave by breaking their bodies. You have to break them here. You have to get them to believe that they're a slave. You have to, or else it doesn't matter. They can run away. They won't do the work. They'll whatever. But if you can break them up here and make them believe they're slaves and strip them of that identity, their history, then we got them. And then you add everything else in, right? The colorism. Let's put the ones that look like this in the house and make it look like their work is less hazardous. And let's put the ones that look like this over here. So now, not only have we stripped them of their identity, but now they're starting to have issues with each other. How can they ever get together and rise up against this institution if they can't even get together and come together to understand that they're all Africans, right? And they're all enslaved and they're all being oppressed and they all deserve better. If they can't even do that, then we're good. And so that same mindset from, when slavery was happening, the transatlantic slave trade from Europe all the way here, that same mindset is happening right now. And that's exactly what these right-wing Republicans are trying to continue going, right? And again, there's nuances because they're not calling it the same thing that they were calling it then. It's not slavery anymore. It's let's just teach them that slavery was something that happened. It's gone. We had a Black president. Why are you guys still mad? Right? It's let's just change the language, but we're going to make sure that they're still not learning the truth about who they are. Because if they do, if they learn critical race theory, if they learn these systems were meant to oppress them, not meant to benefit them, even when we give them the Civil Rights Act here or there, or we give them Roe v. Wade, we give them this, but these oppressed groups, we have to still keep them oppressed. Otherwise, there's the best way I can describe this part. There's a Toni Morrison quote, and she basically says, if you have to, in order for you to be tall, if someone has to be short for you to be tall, you have a problem. Right? And that has always been the problem with white people in America from the beginning, right? When we ask people of color, asked for equality and we ask for equity, that is taken as you need to take from me, right? Like so you're saying that I can't be equal if you want to be equal. And we're like, no, you can stay where you are, but you're going to have to divest in some of that privilege so that everybody can live here and be safe and be happy and really live this American dream that everyone talks about. And they take that as a complete threat to their power structure, which it has become at this point.
It's amazing. I highly recommend that people read the Wilmington's Lie. It's a very, very, especially
Yeah,
with the
that's good.
reconstruction, and it really goes into how the outcry was, "I want to be equal now." The the law says that we're equal, we are equal, and so everything started coming into place where home ownership, land ownership,
Mhm.
judges, lawyers, police officers, from sheriffs and everything that were now have they were actually black faces, and it was crazy that it turned around pretty quickly. And then when things started turning around very quickly, what happened is, oh, we got to do a change.
Exactly.
Let's put it in law, which is exactly what's happening now.
Exactly.
Yep. So, but that was a great book, and I'm still at three-quarters done, but I love it, because what happens is that book always stops me. It gives me a fact, and then now I got to go research it. So now I'm becoming entrenched into the second story that they're actually talking about,
Mhm.
and then I'm trying to learn some more. I'm trying to learn me something today, as Mr. John Clark says. I'm trying to learn me something today, and so I end up learning that. I start learning things, and I stay and I get away from the book for a little bit, and then I go back to the book. So, but let's see. Let's go to some of these comments here. Um, Oh, she's up here preaching,
She
preaching,
said what
preaching.
she said.
Hashtag she said what she said. Awesome. And it's good. Um, and by the way, that comment's coming from Dollar Moore. Dollar Moore. Look into that. I'm gonna have that commercial being broadcast during this podcast or before this podcast when it's on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. You will hear that commercial. Dial more, and it's winter's coming, so it's going to be Dollar Shover, and that's when this
Oh,
young man comes into play, and he does his great professional work here. So, um, let's see here. This last comment, it says it's a wrap. Awesome. Lost for words. Actually, you definitely had made this podcast so beautiful and great. I'm loving it. I can't wait to. I always The best thing about podcast is I listen the day after. And the day after, now I'm
mhm.
listening to you, especially when it's in my car or in my van. I'm listening to it. I'm saying, "Whoa, I missed that," or "That was deep," and that's what I like about the podcast, that I'm able to listen to it the day after and surely appreciate what my guests have taught me. And you taught me a lot. You taught the listeners a lot. And actually, this comment you should hear and listen. She is absolutely on point. The white majority only sees equal rights as a means of taking some of their rights away. The majority doesn't want us to be equal because they fear what levels we will eventually rise to. And when you talk about raising up to a certain level, there's not going to be divide. There's going to be some inclusion. I think that when we rise up, we decide, we we allow people to be inclusive and hear some of the stories, and things are not being eliminated, and but it's all good. It's all good that we're bringing a lot to the table. We all bring so many things to the table. Um,
Absolutely.
Sierra Sierra says protecting our minds and pushing ourselves to unlearn what we've been told, and be willing to self-educate is crucial. So true.
Yeah. Period.
Sierra was a past guest on the Really Charlie podcast, and her book Misguided. She goes into so much different poetry, and which is right there. That's why I love writing. I write every day, and Sierra has definitely wrote some things that are very personal, and inspiring. A lot of her poems I already caught a few things, whether it's within the poem or within the title, and it causes me to write. But
Mm,
she's definitely got 5 stars on both her books.
that's beautiful.
Let's see. All right, Laurel. This is tough. This may be, you know, we're at 45, 49 minutes. So the last question I have here is CRT, critical race theory, was initially debated in colleges and universities. Are the lower levels of education capable of debating something like this?
Yeah, I mean, they are. Like I said, it's very complicated. The different things. For example, probably a year ago, wrote this Facebook post. There was something happening about the debate over gun control, and I basically said, "Well, if we just criminalize whiteness, can we just do that?" And people got mad. People were
Mhm.
mad because they heard that as, so you don't want white people to own guns, and I got reported for it, and it got to all that good stuff. Cool. But that's not what I said. It's not about white people not owning guns. Just like in this situation, it's not about white people being, you know, ignorant or having these things. It's about whiteness. And that is a concept that is a definitely higher level, but I think can still be broken down, but it's very complicated. And so things like whiteness, and even talking about social construct, which whiteness is a social construct, which basically says if you are this race, if you look like this, if your skin color is white, or even any, it's very complicated, but it kind of works for any race sometimes. But
Hmm.
based on whatever race or level of status you have, whiteness is a thing that you can achieve. So it's like a coat that you can put on, basically, or a
Yeah.
club. Like you have to fit these certain requirements to get into this club. But if you fit them, even if you don't fit all of them, maybe just a few, you can get into this club. And most of the time, that has to do with money. It has to do with gender. It has to do with, race again. But that's what whiteness is. And so that's something that is really important to this conversation that I don't think younger, even in high school, I don't think would be understood well, just because I'm not sure of any curriculums or anything that would be able to teach it. you know,
Mhm.
Basically, like I said, I studied it for 4 years at the undergraduate level, and I still am understanding it to this day and finding the ways, seeing the ways that it manifests in people and in situations and in American systems and structures. And so it's very complicated. And so that part and those complicated pieces, some things just have to be left to people that have kind of gone through the stages. But that being said, in order to part of going through those stages, you still need that basic education before you reach this level, right? Like you have to take a 101 before you take the 200 level class, right?
Mhm.
And so kids need to be taught, just at a minimum, their history, like who they are. There's books, and again, it's just sinister. I keep bringing up these words, ugly, sinister, evil, because that's what it is.
Mhm.
There are books. I have a friend of mine, my mentor, Gypsy Murphy. I hope she sees this. But she at one point was going back and forth with Amazon because Amazon was selling this book from this author who wrote about it's a children's book about Harriet Tubman, and she literally says in the book, Harriet liked being a slave, but right, like Harriet enjoyed being a slave. It's
Wow.
just that her master was mean and she didn't want. And if those kind of things are, it's totally acceptable for those things to be taught. We have to ask ourselves, why is it such a problem for the powers that be for us to learn about the Dred Scott decision, about Ruby Bridges,
Mhm.
about the Little Rock Nine? Well, even then, why was it so difficult for that group of students to walk into a school? They had to have the U.S. Marshal Service come and escort them with long guns into high school because
Yeah.
people didn't want them being educated at the same level that they were because they were Black. Why is that such a threat? And kids need to learn that. They need to learn that history, and so that they can understand why it for the systems and the structure of racism, why them being educated on the history that tells them why Blackness is so threatening, why equality and equity as it applies to non-white groups is so threatening, that we are willing to go through the most extreme heights to break it down. Where, like I said, now people are literally losing their jobs because they're teaching about Black history,
Yeah. Yeah.
losing their jobs. It's just ridiculous. And at some point, there's this another quote, and I forget who says it, but it goes something like, "Ignorance in and of itself is not malicious, but when there's truth in the mix and ignorance remains the same, it becomes malicious." Right.
Yes.
And so not understanding critical race theory, not understanding why, a lot of people, I don't want my kids being taught that they're less than just because of this. And, you know, you're being ignorant. And I understand that maybe you don't understand. Maybe you didn't study this in school, or you never paid attention, or you're white and you don't have Black people or Indigenous people in your sphere of influence. And you've only known, people like you your whole life. And I get that. But once I give you the truth and the facts, if you take that and you don't read it, or you don't look at it and on purpose, and you say, then now that's a problem.
Hmm.
That's an issue. That's an issue, and it becomes a weapon, right?
So true. The it's amazing how you and I have talked, what, 2 weeks ago maybe, and trying to get this going, and get this podcast on the air. Um, how much more did you learn just by saying, "Hey, I'm going to be on a podcast. I gotta learn something. I gotta learn something today." And everything that you thought you learned or knew, you learned something else. And this is what this does. This will always lead us to learning some more, and not be ignorant, whether you're black or white. Because some people just don't want to fight that fight about it. I got no time for this. And they believe it to be political, and they avoid talking about the issue, talking about it, and just because it's political, we're kind of exhausted right now. And I try to get many people to give you a question on this podcast. I said, look, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's political. No, I got nothing to do. And I'm saying, wait a minute. I'm coming to you because I respect your intellect. I respect what you bring to the table. Now I want to bring it to another leader. I want to bring it to a leader. I want to see how she answers it. Guess what? She may teach you something. You may teach her something, but I want to bring these questions out. It's a history class.
Mm-hmm.
It's a people class. It's a people class that we're trying to do. Uh, but all in all, before I continue on with my rant right here, Laurel, you definitely did me good on this podcast. You did our people good. You did our country good by bringing this intellect to the table. And there's going to be many more that are going to see this. So we have created a history lesson. We have created a lesson, a class lesson. Let me say that we created a class lesson for someone else to learn. When it's on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, someone's going to learn today for what you spoke about and what we discussed. So I appreciate you coming on here today. It really, really means a lot. And look at this. We got some comments here that someone asked if you knew the name of that book. Maybe I'll try to look it up too and put it in the comment sections later.
Oh, yeah, I can find that. It's still up there. That's the other thing, by the way, is that I think that she ended up getting blocked from seeing that page in general because Amazon
Okay.
refused to take it down. So that also is a thing. But yeah, it's still there.
Okay.
So it's still there, and people can still buy that, but they can't
No.
buy Angela Davis and bring it to school if they want to.
Yeah. This might be the most important podcast you have done. What an impact. Wow. Hey, that's pretty. That's nice. Nice to hear. And I got to agree. I knew this. Um, a mutual friend, Gardner Green, he knew it. He said, great job. You know, it's another good supporter. Frank Slaughter says there's so much value in truths. And Frank Slaughter says, and understanding the truth would erase disinformation and stereotypes about others that the actual telling the truth would bring us together with a powerful weapon, truth. So true.
Exactly. That's a
Mm.
really great point, Frank, that I'm glad that you said that because again, when I talk about the opposition, a lot of times people ask, we did an episode on Grapevine on this, and it was a complete mess. Complete mess. We had some Candace Owens level Black Republicans just saying nonsense, and we didn't get to say what we wanted to say because we were just going back and forth with those people. But a lot of times people ask, why do you think there's such a pushback against critical race theory, right? And again, the only reason that I can think of and that a lot of scholars and academics have come up with is just the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want people to learn the truth for the reasons that I've laid out on this episode. That power that comes from identity, if you can strip that from people in Black and brown communities, then you can control them. And the people who sit there and act like they don't understand, and I'm talking about the people in Washington, I'm talking about the people that pull the strings in America, the rich and the powerful white people who pull the strings in America, they know, they know. And they get on these shows and they may act like they whatever, they don't want to talk about it, but they understand that when Black and brown people know the truth, and when that truth is taught even to white children, whoever you are, but when the truth about America, about who we are, how we got to be here, what we're still doing, there are still children in cages as we speak. When we start talking about that more, they know it's over. It's
Mm-hmm.
over, right? Because now these people have the tools to rise up and to say no more. You know, we're not going to let white supremacy plague this nation. That, and I'm glad that you said it in the beginning, like you're proud to be an American, you're proud to be here, and I am too. And a lot of people, and a lot of my colleagues will be like, well, why? How can you be proud? Because my ancestors made the best of a really trash situation,
Mm-hmm.
that they were like, they really did. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what we built. And I want the world to know that. I want everybody to know and be proud of their histories. You know what I mean? And once we can all do that, again, it's people look at white supremacy like it's crosses burning on a lawn, or a Dylan roof, or all these different people, and that is a piece of it. But the biggest thing is, again, this control over education, this control over voting rights, which is also a big thing that we're struggling with right now. The Voting Rights Act being gutted.
Mm-hmm.
The disgraced former president, who I normally call him Voldemort, or from Harry Potter, or I say he who shall not be named, because I just don't want, I have to sage in here now after that, but just even thinking about him. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just constant attacks being made on voting, on equality, on education, on human rights, on protesting, on even in my field that I'm in now, in hiring practices. You'd be surprised, all these different places where it's, oh, there's just no Black people that know how to do this. Yes, there is.
Yes.
Where are you pulling from when you're hiring? You know what I mean? And what's the reason that you're not pulling from those places? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're able to learn critical race theory and the history the way I've learned it, again, you're able to ask those questions, and it always leads to the structures. The structures were made this way. At the end of the day, America was made by white people for white people, and that's
Exactly.
the truth. And there's so many facts that are out there, and I hope nobody's been feisty, and I'm glad, because I don't want to spend too much time on that. But if you need that information, Google it, and you can look it up and see. Start with
Yeah.
1492 and work your way down. Start with the transatlantic slave trade and work your way down. Learn about it. If you're Cape Verdean, learn about your ancestors, who they were, where they came from.
Yeah. And
Do,
and
do your
and
work.
and
Do
as
your
we're
work.
trying to learn that, learning is, you have to learn the person in the mirror. You have to learn that person first. And if you don't learn it, look for it. Look for it. It's and you're going to be amazed. You're going to be
And
amazed.
if you're
Yep.
afraid to look for that person, ask yourself why.
Yeah, exactly. It's the knowledge is power.
Is that supposed to be an exclamation point or a question mark?
I think it
Like
should
that.
be. Yeah, it should be just like this hello is. Boom.
Yeah, yeah,
Bam. And knowledge is power. It's so important.
right.
The Well, we got to do this again, and I don't one thing I want to recommend, well, uh, some of my friends, they have the Wind Down podcast. They get to give you a little glass of wine and you just kind of talk about different subjects. But I'm going to have them reach out to you. I'm going to have them reach out to you because it's a male and female host, and it's B. Carter and C. Lister. And what they do is they just talk about things like you're talking about. It doesn't have to be critical race theory. It might be just something about women and women empowerment, and that's something that I hope I'm going to highly recommend and tell them to reach out to you. The only thing is they do their podcast live. You have to go into the studio, which is in New Bedford, and I think
Okay.
it would be something that would be nice for you to be. But I'll reach out to them. I'll see them Tuesday night, um, and I'll shoot them a text during the weekend and have them reach out to you. Do you mind if I give them your email?
No, go for it. I again, it's an honor to be here. And anyone else that I collaborate with, and we talk about these issues. I take it very seriously. A lot of, I think I get nerves working up to it, not because I don't want to speak or I get nervous in front of people. But anytime I'm speaking, whether it's in person or on a podcast and I'm discussing these issues, there's just that sense of anxiety or nervousness. I don't know which one it is because it's such an important platform. And it's so, you can like, if I had someone when I was, if podcasts were more popular when I was in middle school and I could listen to someone saying stuff that I said right now, my I would have avoided so many pitfalls that I went through growing up,
True.
being a Black girl trying to act like I was white. I
Hmm.
just would have. And so, for any child, any adult, any whoever you are, to be able to reach those ears, even if it's just one person, and knowing that you have the power and the capability to change their way of thinking or to change their lives, that person might be the next big activist that our generation remembers their name and they take us into a new decolonial state. Like, I don't
Hmm.
know, but it's really important. It's really important. And so I was telling you before we did started, I don't take it for granted at all. And it's a huge honor to be considered to do it.
That's it. Um, my friend Laura Cheryl says, Laurel and Charlie, thank you for a great show. And it was a great show. Laura, who was your lighthouse? Who was your lighthouse growing up? Let's give them some praises. Let's give them some flowers. Like we're giving you flowers right now for this great
Yeah.
podcast. Who was your lighthouse that gave you, that allowed you to see that light, that led you in a direction that, mom and dad are proud of, and that you're proud of? Who was that lighthouse in your life?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because while I talk about growing up and being kind of socialized around whiteness and things like that, the family that I had around me, although they may not have had the capacity all the time to teach me, you know, that about anti-black racism and how that can manifest inside yourself and how you can be
Hmm.
anti-black inside as a black person. They might not have
Yes.
had that language to say those things. But my mom, my dad, my cousin Melanie, my cousin Sage, my grandmother, Dolores Spencer, who's like
Hmm.
everyone in New Bedford knows my Grammy.
Yes.
They gave me the tools to always want better for myself and to always shake up the silence, question what's normal. Why is that normal? Ask questions, do things that are outside of your comfort zone, because they always gave me um, that push. My uncle David always used to say that every time to this day when he sees me, my uncle David Spencer always
Hmm.
says, I always knew you're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be a lawyer. When I was a little girl, like I think when I was born, he was like, she's going to be like, I have a sense, right? And he like prophesied over my life that I was going to be an attorney. And they always just gave me that encouragement that it's like, you have a voice. And
Yes.
they directed that voice, right? They directed that voice to make sure that I always use it for good and for empowerment, and for God. And so for that, my family is everything. My family is everything, and that's my lighthouse right there. And it's strong, and gets taller every time I learn something new. And yeah.
That's That's good. I get that saying, the light, who is your lighthouse, from uh childhood friend Stephen Pemberton. He wrote the book The Lighthouse,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's
Understood.
from New Bedford. Very
Yeah.
inspiring story. He was a guest on here not too long ago. So and 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 I want to give the flowers to David Spencer, a very good man to me throughout my life since I was a young man, young child rather,
Yep.
and he's definitely been. He tells me stories about my dad and him, and how my dad affected him and inspired him in many ways. Just being that protector,
Mm,
So you come from a good rooted tree, and I'm very happy that
thank
you and
you.
I can now be friends and build on this relationship, and definitely
Absolutely.
let's do things together. And whether it's this podcast or me, just us both just supporting each other in whatever we're doing, and
Absolutely.
that's what it's about. All right, let me see.
Absolutely.
Frank Slaughter saying, "Excuse my typos. I'm watching from an iPhone rather." Frank, you did. We got your message, man, and we talked about it. Laurel just definitely talked about it. It was a good comment, and those are the things that we need on this podcast. MC Elder Salah Mateos, a great mentor, a great advocate, and definitely a huge part of the Cape Verdean independence and the civil rights movement. So, Salah, thank you for tuning in to the podcast. Laurel, whatever you want to end this podcast in, you can say it, and it may be just a goodbye or hello or whatever it may be, but I want to end this podcast with you saying something to us.
Thank you. I want to say that we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. And for everybody watching, for everybody that you share this with, do
Right
your
on,
work. Do your work. It starts
right on,
here. It starts here. That's it.
man. Facts. You dropped the mic and you don't even have one. I love it.
All
All right, my dear.
right. Thank you, Charlie, for having me. I
You,
can't thank you enough.
oh, I can't thank you. And listen, listening to this podcast the day after is even better. So you listen to us later on
Absolutely.
Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and Facebook.
Absolutely.
All right, my dear. Electric hug. Here you go. All right. Peace. God bless.
God
Take care.
bless.
All right. There's something about good people. And Laurel Berryman is good people. She's definitely bringing her education to the front lines. And you listen to her in this podcast. She got you. She got you. You're gonna. She's that. She grabs your ear with a not like a nana or a papa ear. Grabbing. She's pulling on that ear and she's allowing you to listen to her voice, her intellect. And I enjoyed everything that I listened to her through podcast, and she's definitely got a fan. Charlie Perry is a fan of Laurel Berryman and everything that she brings to the table. She's a teacher and she doesn't even know it. She's teaching us some of the things that we need to know as a country, as a people. And I love being here. I love this country, but we got a ways to go, and we're working on it. And between myself and many other people, we're going to change some things. And Cheryl says she is a sweetheart. She is a sweetheart, you know, but she's also going to tell you what you need to know. And so this was a great podcast, one of my favorites already, and we're not even ended yet. So we're going to continue to bring on guests just like Laurel Berryman, and we're going to bring them on and just listen to what they have to say. It's about giving them flowers while they're standing. And I hope I gave her the flowers that she deserves. dozen roses, 2 dozen roses. She definitely deserves everything that she got. All right, everyone. Continue to listen to the Really Charlie podcast on StreamYard, Anchor, Spotify, Facebook, and YouTube. We will be back on the podcast Wednesday, December 1st, with William Kennedy, a local artist who's now venturing on to his own business. And I want to highlight him also in some of the things that he's done. And I'm very proud of him. All right. God bless. Thank you very, very much for listening. And if you need anything, give me a holler and continue to add to the comments during this podcast, and we'll try to address anything that you have, any kind of concerns. I'll put you in the right direction of understanding critical race theory, aka CRT. All right. God bless. Stay blessed and be well.